best day ever.
It is the best day ever. So is yesterday, and so is tomorrow, and every day from now until forever.
You have no idea how difficult it is to compete against these Barbie doll types.
That's true.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Semi-Sages of the Pages. I was going to wave and cheer. So we are excited. We just finished up our land survey phase. If you haven't seen the videos, you haven't seen the checklist, go back, make sure you watch it. But something else we're excited about is we all went to the movies and we saw Barbie.
We did.
To love or not to love Barbie, that is the question.
It's been very, very polarizing. So we're going to talk about Barbie in terms of the land survey phase as a case study, but I will also warn you, there are spoilers. So if you haven't seen it yet and you don't want it ruined, go ahead and switch over to one of our other videos and then watch Barbie and then come back and watch this one.
Yeah.
See if you agree with us.
Make sure, hit the like, hit the subscribe, make sure you support us, but also be warned, there might be spoilers.
Spoilers.
Spoilers?
What spoilers?
Did Barbie succeed in this phase? So the first thing, right? What was the conflict? Did they have a conflict set up in the movie?
Yeah, like her inciting incident was an existential crisis. She started, having thoughts about D-word.
Death, which is kind of odd in a doll.
I love the idea that Barbie starts questioning her mortality. And I love how that's a parody for the doll as people start criticizing her as Barbie as being antiquated, not feminist enough, not giving women the right image. And so the conflict of the doll in the world questioning her mortality is actually a legitimate question for Mattel. Should they keep making Barbie? Should they keep producing her? So I loved the duality of the conflict.
Yeah, I thought it worked. There were a lot of like micro conflicts and conflicts that happened on different scales. But I thought that like if you look back at like general conflicts, right? This is woman versus the world type of, or versus society, however you want to put it. That's kind of this big, like, where do I fit in? What's my purpose? How do I exist? How do I, find meaning? And then layer on top of that the patriarchy and every character really trying to find meaning and trying to figure out who they are in this society.
It's like a existential crisis, right?
It's like everybody, including, Beach Ken. He had an existential crisis too.
Which I think, and Alan, don't forget, poor Alan.
Can't forget about Alan.
He doesn't, get any resolution to his crisis. But I don't see it as Barbie versus the world. I would see it as Barbie versus herself.
I think it's self. Yeah.
Barbie versus Barbie versus herself.
I think there's elements of self.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so huge spoiler here. So again, warning. It's also Barbie versus Ken. And then the Kens against the Kens. That was my favorite scene.
And you can say Barbie versus the world, sure, because you move worlds and stuff, sure. So maybe what's great about this is that the conflict is looking at, like Molly's hand gesture. If you can't see it, she's showing the
levels. Yeah.
Yeah.
To me, the reason I had picked out against the world is because they're moving into like theme. One of the big themes of the movie was power structures and specifically like the patriarchy and how power structures, get by, how they not progress, but how they proliferate, and how that is ingrained in our society. And even like you could argue whether the Kens are villains or not villains, but certainly they are trying to, again, this is spoilers, right? They're trying to implement a society that everyone has to fight against. Everyone has to kind of band together and fight against.
I would say that they are fulfilling the villain role. If we were going very, very high level and being like, all right, we need to have a conflict, we need to have a villain, Ken is the villain, or the Kens are the villains.
What about the company CEO?
So that's an interesting one. I was thinking about that. So is Mattel a villain as well? Because, you know, again, huge spoilers. They found Barbie out in the real world and they're like, well, that can't happen. And they tried to put her back into her box so that she wasn't thinking again. She was stereotypical Barbie and everything was perfect. Go ahead.
I think there's this really interesting shift in the movie that frames, you know, Ken is the ally and the big corporation is the villain. And then there is a shift, right, where Ken becomes kind of the villain, or at least representative of the antagonistic side.
Yes.
Right. And the company takes a sideline. They're not really, you know, the second half or the last third, however much of the movie it is, they're not really in a villain role anymore. They're chasing after, they're there, but their plans are a little I honestly thought the plans were a little unclear. What they were going to do was a little unclear. I was not sure if they were villains anymore, but certainly there's this interesting like shift between Ken being the ally sidekick to more of a villain.
It was more of a lovers to enemies. Go ahead.
For me, they maintained ultimate villain status with Will Ferrell says, you know, we have to get back Barbie house and stuff, and they're like, no, you know, Dojo Mojo Casa House.
Dojo Mojo Casa House.
Personally, I want one of those instead of
the
horses.
Dojo Mojo
I was
Casa
like,
House.
oh, that's my house. But you know, he's like, oh, we have to get rid of that, and the guy goes, why? It's making more money.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, oh, it's fine. And so what, you know, then we want whatever's going to make more money. And so for me, that entrenched them as the true villain who doesn't care about the characters or their well-being, but only about their own bottom line. And they're willing to put people in boxes and they'll just be on whatever side will make them money. So for me personally, they'll keep the role of the ultimate villains.
That's why I think, to me, like the ultimate villain is more of the society kind of aspect, right? The Kens aren't really bad. They just didn't have power. They found out they could have power. They got excited. They wanted it. And they tried to corrupt that society to a more equal society where they could have houses. You know, and like you said, and brewskis and bro nights and guitar playing. And like you said, Morgan, like, you know, are the individual characters at the company evil or villains? Maybe, or maybe just this concept of making money is, you know, antagonistic at its core, you know, maintaining the status quo. This idea at the end of what's the ending for Barbie? Oh, she's in love with Ken. And she's like, no, I'm not. Like that kind of, that is, you know, the fighting of the structure.
Yeah.
I found when you were talking, I had an aha moment, and then Teresa will move on. I would define what Molly said as the enemy being exclusionary power. So anytime power is used to exclude anyone from Weird Barbie to Ellen, any kind of exclusion in the power dynamic would be the villain of the movie, which is one of the reasons that I think it's worth seeing.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I like that one. So if you're listening to all this and you're like, I'm in the land survey phase, I don't have like the ability to do all the stacking. That doesn't happen in the land survey phase. Land survey phase, you have your theme, you have your conflict, and you have your setting. And then over time, you get more conflicts.
And I think one of the things that Barbie did in terms of conflict theme setting, from that perspective, is they're self-reinforcing items. So what we haven't talked about yet is setting. And the setting really enhances both the conflict and the theme in here, because you have dual settings, right? You have kind of a portal fantasy, if you know what that is. You have the real world, specifically LA, Venice Beach, and you have Barbie Land. and Barbie Land is plastic and beautiful and quote unquote
Pink.
perfect and pink, and it's pink all the time, and all of these kind of things. And then those start contrasting each other when you talk like Morgan mentioned, exclusionary forces. Who gets to have a dream house? Barbie. Who doesn't? Ken.
He doesn't even get a house. He's Beach Ken. He exists, and this is how he's introduced. He exists for Barbie to look at him. He doesn't have a good day unless Barbie looks at him.
So what I love about it, if you're new to Land Survey with us, we're talking about how when you lay out the book, your first book before you even start writing, you want to know your conflict. You want to have a rough idea of your themes. And there's more than one. And as Molly and Teresa were talking, I had this like aha moment that maybe the theme they started with was what's fake and what's real.
Oh.
Because if you look at the conflicts about what's the fake conflict and the real conflict, again, that's brought up what's fake, what's real. And the setting reinforces over and over because there's an intentionality with plastic and with and that was very a deliberate move in the setting to create humor and lightness, but also I think a deeper discussion about what is fake and real in women's expectations about women.
You have no idea how difficult it is to compete against these Barbie doll types.
Yeah, that's true. We're not getting any younger. Yeah.
I thought I was supposed to.
Writing?
Right.
You're at your checklist. There's other things that you need to do too. You need to figure out your why are you writing this book? So why do we think Mattel?
Well,
Mattel?
Well, I mean, there's a movie is harder, not harder, but when creators for a movie, there are so many people involved, right? And I've not read any interviews, so I don't know, but you know, the first thing with a big blockbuster like this, one of the first motivations, one of the first whys is to make money.
Nothing wrong with that.
And they hung a hat on it. That's what
Yeah.
you said with the Dojo Mojo Casa House. You know, they're like, they hung a hat on it and even like villainized themselves and played with that, which also I think was funny. They broke the fourth wall a couple of times for entertainment. So I think it was definitely supposed to be a comedy. I don't think people were supposed to, you know, take this too much to heart and analyze the maps in detail. You know, it was, I think, fun and lighthearted and supposed to just be about dolls, you know.
Mhm.
I think, you know, we've seen a few movies lately that have taken toys and made it into a movie. Toys or like not historic, but nostalgic.
I think like Stranger Things.
No, I'm thinking like Mario. I'm thinking like the Lego movie.
Yeah.
Things like that where they've taken that concept and then made it into a movie. So it's not unprecedented either. They know that that's a way to make money.
Mhm.
And then I think if you're going to come at it with the approach of how do I make a movie about Barbie, there are a lot of interesting thoughts that come up with that. Like Morgan said, what's real, what's not, what's plastic? Has Barbie succeeded in being a model for young women, for girls, or has she just made it worse?
Yeah.
They never answer that question. That's up to you to decide.
Yeah. You know, the question of, the movie starts off so well with this idea about these little girls are playing with the baby dolls, and then Barbie comes, this perfect woman that you can dress up and play house with, you know, that she doesn't have any kids, and dress in all these gorgeous outfits because she can be anybody and go anywhere. And so it's this really, really fun look at, did Barbie destroy us or did she save us? Or is she still in the process of both? And I don't know, but that's kind of maybe that was one of the audience whys that they were trying to dig into. Why did they think that this movie would hit? And it has hits. We know it's hits.
Yeah, say what you want about if you like it, you don't like it, whatever. It hit. It's
It
made money, it's hitting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why? So that's the thing when we talk in the land survey, like they had to anticipate why would audiences want to come see this film?
Mhm.
And clearly they got that right. And I think part of it is one, it's funny, and we all knew it was going to be funny. And I think that another big part of it, part of the why, even if you don't know what the movie is going to be about, you don't know what the plot structure is or anything like that, you know it's going to be funny, and you know some of the actors involved, and maybe you like some of the actors involved. And there's a lot of nostalgia for the 90s right now. And they went hard into like some of that 90s vibe.
Yeah. And I think there was for little girls that played with Barbie, me, there was a lot of like, oh, I know that, and I remember that, and oh my gosh, I remember, I forget the name of the character, but the character that was pregnant and the
Midge.
pooping dog
Midge?
and Midge and the pooping dog, and a lot of people had a weird Barbie.
Who
And for
didn't have a
people
weird Barbie?
who didn't like Barbie as a child and didn't relate to that, which would be me, I went to see it because the thing said love Barbie or hate Barbie, and my daughter I should say drove me, but encouraged me to go. And I ended up as someone who really is not a fan of the image that Barbie put out in the 90s to girls my age. And yeah, and the tiny waist, and the blonde, always the blonde kind of thing. I was reticent to even let my own child play with Barbies, and that maybe that sounds too harsh, but that was just part of the dialogue of, I was the tomboy. I couldn't relate to Barbie yet until Crisis.
Right.
And I loved it because they had a character who said how there's a teenage girl character who kind of said what my critique of the movie was in the first act. She stood up and just let her have it right as soon as she crossed into the new world. And I think that was kind of a catharsis to a lot of people who wanted that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as an author, I think if you know you're going to write something that's going to receive criticism,
Own it.
you can let one of your characters, criticize them in that story and own it. And I think Barbie is a walking example of the audience crave that. And whether they love or hate it, they're going to pay you money and come see it and talk about it if you take that choice.
Exactly.
And I thought, I'm going to hammer this. Like, it took a stance on a lot of different things, right? But one of the things that didn't, and we talked about this a little bit, one of the things it didn't take a stance on, and it let you yourself make a decision, was Barbie itself. The concept of Barbie, the Barbie dolls, right? It gave you pros, it gave you cons, it, kind of explored that, but there was no like thing at the end that said, yeah, Barbies helped a generation, see themselves better. No, they didn't do that. They didn't say, Barbie's been harming people's self-images and, expectations and realistic expectations forever. They presented both sides, and they made kind of stances in other areas. And then they let kind of just you as an audience get to stay, whether you hate or love Barbie, you can stay there if you want, and you can find substantiating evidence in that movie to continue to support those sides.
Well, and they went meta. They went with
Yep.
they went really meta with the idea that the value that you place on Barbie, you as the individual watching this or anyone playing with it, that is the value that exists because the idea is more powerful. And since the idea is more powerful, then the child playing with the Barbie has the power.
Ooh. Oh, you went. That's a good
Or imitate
theme.
life.
Well, that's what she was saying. The creator was saying to her in the tunnel when she was talking about the idea matters. We're all going to die, right? Big spoiler alert.
We're all gonna die?
Well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but
Everyone dies!
everyone
Like my story? No, not your story, a story.
never dies.
Sounds good, but it is good.
My final theme that I wanted to touch on that Morgan here teed me up for was, does life imitate art, or does art follow us? And I think they did an excellent job framing that, right? Why does Barbie have an existential crisis? Is it because her owner does? Or does Barbie drive our real life first? I don't know.
Good question.
Let us know what
Does-
you think.
Yeah, I like it.
All right,
Go
join
right.
us for the next phase. Get out of
See you
here.
later. Go put words on paper. Bye.